Excellent. Thank you, Parrish. Great to see everybody here. Can everybody hear me, see me, that sort of thing? How are we doing? Everything's good? Okay, awesome. First of all, welcome to everybody. Some people might be new. It looks like some other people are returned. So, for everybody, just as an overview, I try to do these Zoom sessions once every month or 2 months for our clients and also for other people that just want to learn a bit more about property management, what our market's going through, and that sort of thing. So, thank you, Parish. I appreciate that. For those of you that may have been on the last call. I talked about the rental market in the first quarter of the year, and I said there's a couple of places that were some actually good news. Okay, so I was really interested this month in getting into April and May's data, and seeing, is the good news getting better or are we doing worse? That sort of thing. We're going to find out what's normal, what's going on right now, and just, a couple of things that I wanted to bring up, and thank you, Parrish, for that introduction. But real quickly, it's always amazing to me that for doing things as long as I have over the last like close to 30 years in property management, how quite honestly, how some people treat property management like they're not specialists at all, like myself, that sort of thing. So, like again, for those people that don't understand and stuff like that. Like again, I'm the only master property manager in Southwest Florida that's the highest designation you can get as an individual. I am still serving on a national property management committee. I've done that for the last 5 to 6 years. I've been serving locally for the last 25 years. On the local property management association, they refused to let me go, although I've offered to retire. But I still help the local property management group. And last month, I went to the owner broker conference. I was the only one from the area to go. So it's kind of interesting that when you see something like the broker owner conference and how important it is, and it's dealing with the technological changes, what's happening in the industry, and so forth. I was the only one from the area. And again, just real quickly, I can't say it enough. Hats off to my staff. Red Fortress was ranked number one by three third parties, Business Rate and PropertyManagement.com. The cool thing is that PropertyManagement.com deals only with property management companies, and they have a very, very specific criteria how they do things. I know that I spent over an hour answering some of their questions and that to make sure that what I was saying was true. And again, we're the only certified management company in Southwest Florida. So again, hats off to my staff. They do a great job. And so real quickly, what's upcoming for you guys? And I'm going to try and do this in probably, let me see, 25 minutes or so. And then, like Paris said, I'm also going to certainly look into answering your questions as things pop up. Let's talk about what's upcoming. So first of all, when we're talking about the rental market and how are things going, it's very, very important to understand what's happening in the renter's mind. And there is also that decision for them. Do they continue to rent? Do they move elsewhere to rent? Or do they consider buying? Okay, so I'm going to touch on that. Then the next thing we're going to talk about briefly, as I try to do, is the current rental market analysis. So I'm going to go over what we talked very briefly on the first quarter information and also what's happening with the newer data. Like I said, I want to bring people up to speed because I was very interested to see myself what was happening now today. And then we're going to talk very briefly about the local economy and how it affects our rental markets because, well, you hear a lot of things in the news and they're talking about like interest rates and inflation rates and stuff. All of that does affect us, but also the local economy really truly affects us. And then we're going to get into building permits. Okay, so we're going to talk supply side. What's happening? How is the building going? Is the building increasing, decreasing, speeding up, that sort of thing? And then we're going to talk about demand. So, what's happening with the net migration into our area? Okay, so we're going to talk about are more people coming in? How fast are they coming in? What does that look like when we look at what are we actually doing in terms of building? And so forth. So everybody would agree that we have a lot of properties on the rental market for rent. So is that increasing, decreasing, and what does demand look like versus supply? So let's talk about the first point, and that renters are buyers too. So here was a story that I got a couple of days ago. I always seek to bring you guys up to speed on the latest thing. And so they were talking about Zillow and shoppers that are sometimes looking to buy as well as rent at the same time. And they said that up to 8% of renters are also looking to buy as well. And so what's interesting is that they were talking about most of these being in like more expensive areas like New York City and so forth. You can see it right over here. But here's the big takeaway. They were talking about that owning right now in these markets, not necessarily ours, but owning in these markets, it's more expensive to own the same property as it is to rent. Okay. So in other words, when you're looking at things, they're saying that, hey, if you buy the same property, um, you would be spending about $415 more than if you were to actually rent it. So this kind of becomes a little bit more interesting. Well, okay, what does that kind of look like for people in Southwest Florida? So your renter right now, if it's occupied, are they actually in Southwest Florida able to buy something more than if they actually rented it? Okay. And there are a lot of renters right now that, to be perfectly honest with you, are being lured away by new construction with financial buy downs. And what I mean by that is where they artificially buy down the interest rates. It goes from, say, you know, 6% down to 4%. Okay. So one of the people that have come to know me through Zoom, one of the things a Resi Club does, one of our suppliers of information and so forth, here we're looking at what happened to the actual value of real estate at the height of COVID in our area and throughout the nation in 2022. So, for those that are new, basically what happened was when you had COVID and you had places being locked down and you had a lot of internal migration by people, a lot of say people from the Northeast coming to Florida, that kind of represented the highest peak prices for our area. And one of the things that you're going to look at right here, as I pointed out on the screen, hopefully you can see that, is Punta Gorda, you see minus 25.4%. You see Cape Coral almost at 19%. Don't feel too bad. Austin, for those that have been following along for the last year, Austin and Punta Gorda have been rivaling each other neck and neck to see whose property could be the highest in the nation to fall. A dubious distinction, but one nonetheless that we have to look at. So what that basically means is that when you're looking at the data and you're looking at a renter, if your home was worth 250,000, say 3 to 4 years ago at the height, in Punta Gorda, that $250,000 property right now is worth around 187,000. So it's lost over $60,000. Okay. And this is important for a lot of reasons, like what can they afford, what can they finance, that sort of stuff. And by the way, another number that I thought was kind of interesting is that the real estate industry in Florida is worth $473 billion. That's with a B, $473 billion, and it represents 26% of Florida's GDP. So real estate, very, very important. So when you see numbers like this, that doesn't do Florida any good. So we normally try to adjust like we have in the past. So when we're looking at that kind of drop, basically, from Cape Coral going down to almost 19% from the height in 2022. You see uh, Punta Gorda down 25%. So one of the things that I thought was interesting, this comes from the U.S. Census Bureau. It was talking about what are the incomes for the average person in Lee, Collier, and Charlotte. So here you can see Collier County up to 95,000. That's as of 2024. You can see Lee County, the average rate is 83,000. And Charlotte County, kind of like 2023 to 2024, kind of leveled out to 72,000. Okay, so there's a reason why there's differences in numbers. There's a reason why people in Florida might make more than Alabama, but a lot less than New York and California, right? It has to do with population, taxes, that sort of thing. But it kind of makes an interesting question that you see, I thought was interesting about this data was a very large increase from 2023 to 2024 for Lee County. And Collier people tend to have more money down there. The real estate tends to be a lot more expensive than, say, Lee County. So when you look at this and people's ability to buy things, not to worry about the numbers, and I'll take questions on this in a second here, but what's really interesting is like taking that number and realizing that Lee County, if you follow me, that it's just over 86,000 on average. So if you were right here at the $86,000 household income, that would mean that you would probably be able to afford $290,000 home. Okay, that's what this kind of graph is showing. Yes, the numbers always change depending on the interest rate, but just follow me here. So what they're saying is if you make $86,000 on average in Lee County, you're going to be able to afford approximately 290,000. And what that represents is a payment just over, excuse me, didn't mean to click there, just over $2,100 a month. That's what your payment would be when you put 10% down and you do taxes and insurance and that sort of thing. Okay, so the question you would ask if you're a renter to some extent is, hey, listen, if I'm paying $2,100 a month in rent, could I rent a home that's similarly priced at 290,000 or not? Okay, same thing with Collier County, if you recall, was 95,000. So if you follow this, the same thing for them is on average they could afford $320,000 home. Could you rent a home for $2,400 a month versus buying it for $2,400 a month? And Charlotte County, it's a little less, 73,000, so it kind of comes in at that $250,000 rate I talked to you about. And again, that would mean that you would have probably around like an $1,800 to $1,900 expense to own that home. So the question is, could you do that in Charlotte County, $1,900 or less? Now, I understand that it's not just one-to-one ratio, right? Because buying a home versus renting home requires a lot more. Like it's not just a financial equation. You have to fill out paperwork. You have a down payment, 10%. So, Lee County, you would need, say, $29,000 maybe to put a 10% down, or FHA, it's a little bit less. You're also locking into a property long term and that sort of stuff. So right now, I would say pound for pound, it's far easier to rent in our area than to buy, basically because, especially new construction, they're trying to make it easier. They're lowering the price. They understand there's an oversupply, so they're trying to lure renters away in the first place. Okay, so I've given you a little bit of that idea or mentality of a renter sitting in a property. Are they going to go out and buy, or are they going to go out and rent or stay where they are? So, having said that, Parrish, do we have any questions right now
Still
before I
looks
move on?
clear, Michael. Nothing in the chat box.
Nothing's in the chat. Okay,
You're
excellent then.
you're good to
Okay.
go.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk a little bit more about these numbers. And again, for people that don't like numbers, I get it. Okay. One of the reasons why I started doing this 2 years ago is that I wanted our clients to really understand what I meant or my property managers meant by a down market. Okay. So saying like things are slow, that's great. It's kind of emotional, but it's kind of like saying you had a nice day. Nobody can really qualify it or quantify it. So I wanted to put numbers to things. Okay. So I want to go over this chart really quickly. This is what I did for the quarter 1, and I'm going to do an updated version of it in a second here. So I broke the areas down to Fort Myers, Cape Coral, Lehigh, Port Charlotte, Naples, and Bonita Springs. Okay, and I added Bonita Springs later because I realized it was a smaller subset. But we were managing more and more properties in Bonita Springs, and I thought, well, let's give it its due. It's not North Naples, it's not South Fort Myers, so I added it later, okay? And in each of these quadrants or cities, I gave three distinct patterns: 3 bedrooms, and then the total number of 3 bedrooms, and then what could you get if you had $2,000 or less for rent and $1,700 or less. Now, the way to look at this, if you're a property manager, if you're a landlord, if you're looking to rent or buy properties right now, is look at this first number as the total as expensive properties. Okay, so in March of 2025, you had 541 3 bedrooms for rent in Fort Myers. And then as you look at these expensive properties, 63 of these 541 properties were able to be rented at 2,000 or less, and then 1,700 or less, there were 10. Okay, and so we keep going all the way down for Cape Coral, Lehigh, Port Charlotte, Naples, and that sort of stuff. So what happened year over year? Okay, so in the first quarter video that I did. It's always great when January and February rolls around because typically in our area, we have a lot of snowbirds, we have a lot of traffic. They've come in November, December. There's a lot of economic activity. If you've ever tried to eat during this time, you probably had longer waits, that sort of stuff. So when I was looking at it, I wanted to make it year over year, not just quarter over quarter, because I wanted the results to be more realistic. So you can see that year over year that the number of properties for three bedrooms in Fort Myers changed. It went up by 58. Okay. And you also see here that the numbers of $2,000 or less, there were 74 extra properties that you can rent. And likewise, if you had $1,700 a month, the increase of 47, it went from 10 to 57. Okay, so kind of like what do these numbers mean and what does it mean for you as a landlord or as a client of ours and that sort of thing. So whenever you start to see these lower numbers like 1700 increasing or the number of properties increasing 2000 or less or even this top number of more supply coming on the market, this basically represents unfilled supply. So these are things that we want these numbers to all go down. But it first starts with the 1700 or less. Because what happens is these 599, let's say 600 properties, at some point in April, if they don't rent, they're looking to do something like lower the rent or do more work or something like that. And inevitably, until they rent, most people are going to lower it until it gets into this area. And then these guys, if they don't rent in April or May or June, will eventually keep lowering it until they get to 1700. So this is why I say that we're starting to see a little bit of stabilization in the Fort Myers or the greater Fort Myers area. That even though things are starting to go down, and they're still sliding. At least we're starting to see it's kind of a stable but also sliding. Now Cape Coral and Naples are very interesting in this way year over year. We see that these expensive homes, these three bedrooms, actually decreased in Cape Coral. Okay, this is kind of like a good thing. So you went from 1,182 properties down to 837. So we lost 345 three-bedroom homes for rent year over year in Cape Coral. That's great. So this is where I say that the market in Cape Coral is starting to adjust, okay? The reason why I still say it's sliding is look at what happens at the lower end. So we've gone from 34 properties in March of 2025 to 102, basically tripling. So what that's saying is that while we started to lose the total number of rental properties in Cape Coral, you're seeing a lot of people lower the rents because there's not enough renters to meet the demand. It has nothing to do with your home is bad or your duplex or anything else like that. It's just that there's massive amounts of choice. The good news is that there's less choice year over year, but the bad news is that year over year there's more inventory for them to choose at a lower rate because not everything is has been rented, obviously, right? Lehigh, same thing, except that we're getting a lot of new properties all over the place, whether it's the total number of supply of three bedrooms in Lehigh, whether we're looking at 200 or 2,000 or less, we're still getting a lot of almost double. And then even the 1,700 or less is a little bit shocking. Had an extra 91, so that those total number like quintupled. What does Lehigh say? It's just sliding. It hasn't adjusted yet. We're still adding supply compared to demand. And then same thing with Port Charlotte. I won't go through the numbers here. You're getting the gist of it. And again, Naples, which is again different from Charlotte and Lee County for a couple of reasons. You can ask me why later if you like. Just want to get through the numbers right now. So, but that also adjusted, and you had less. 272 properties less year over year. Okay, so the next question comes up is what are we doing now? So this is like an update, right? So we're going to compare April 2025 to April 2026. Okay, so how are we doing? So now we're getting into, we're past the first quarter, we're past season to some extent, not entirely, but we're moving on. All right, so you can see Fort Myers, the inventory is not going up that much. There was only a change of 16, but you're still seeing the rent starting to slide. Okay, that's factual. Okay, so again, they had 10 properties, 1,700 or less that are three bedrooms, 47 now. So we went up by 37. You can even see this 2,000 or less. you can see the numbers going up. Now, somebody might say to me, hey, Michael, I don't have a three bedroom. I have a two bedroom. I have a one bedroom condo, that sort of stuff. I got it. But the reason why I always looked at three bedroom, it's the most desired class of anything. So we talk about six bedrooms. We talk about five bedrooms or one bedrooms. The average person would like more so to live in a three bedroom than anything else. So if we're looking at the peak demand, this is where these numbers really come into effect. But here's some interesting news. Cape Coral, not only did it like last month, it went down, but also the 2000 or less started to go down as well. Now the 1700 or less you notice increased. This is what I mean by it starting to adjust. You're starting to have less three bedrooms on the market in Cape Coral. You're starting to have less three bedrooms on the market for 2000 or less. This is the start of something good. The problem still is that you still have 268 properties that you can rent for $2,000 a month or less, and you have 789 for 1700 or less. So we're starting to see a little bit of a change in Cape Coral. That's good. Lehigh Acres, guys, these numbers, tough market. Okay. If you have a property in Lehigh, it's tough because not only is the total number of properties increasing, okay, so it's gone up by over 10% year over year, three bedrooms, but you're also seeing that the number of properties, 2000 or less, three bedrooms, have almost doubled again. And also look at this, 1700 or less, it's quintupled basically. 36 properties to 131 properties year over year. Lehigh is for sure the toughest market. If you look at Cape Coral, at least there's some adjustment. Lehigh, there has not been an adjustment yet. We have not hit anywhere close to the bottom of the market in Lehigh, unfortunately. Port Charlotte, again, you're seeing a slight adjustment. The total number of three bedroom homes for rent went down a little bit. That's good, but we still see 2,000 or less and 1,700 or less. All those numbers are adjusting and going up. That's normal. People, and we talk to our clients about this all the time. If your property's not renting, it's not because of anything that has been done to the property. Typically, it's because people can get better deals elsewhere and they're looking for value. Again, you look at Naples again compared to March, and just like March and April, the number of properties have gone down by 288. Okay, so that's good. So Naples has started to lose inventory. The big question in all these numbers is when you see something like this in Cape Coral, or you see even a small number like this in Port Charlotte or Naples, here's the question. Are these rental properties coming off the market because they're up for sale? So that's a big question. So you can take your rental property off the market for sale or for rent, put it up for sale, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to sell. What do you think is going to happen after 3, 4, 5, or 6 months? If it doesn't sell, it might come back on the rental market. Okay, so that's why we always have to look at these numbers. I'll give you another slide here. I don't take questions. So when we're looking at Red Fortress, because again we're a sizable company in the area for sure, manage over 500 units all throughout Southwest Florida. So when we're looking at this, I was concerned. Hey, like, listen, we're getting theoretically into the second quarter, and maybe what's going to happen is we're going to see a slowdown in applications. We're going to see a slowdown in move-ins. And so basically, here's the move-ins for Red Fortress 2025 and 2026. So on average, you can see it pretty much here. If you work out the numbers, we're typically moving in a dozen people a month. And so like in January of this year, 16, February 11, March was down to 8, back up to 11 in April, and now this month, which was like as of like 2 or 3 days ago, we have 8 move-ins or 8 people that have moved in already in May or about to move in, right? And then we also have here the number of applications. So you can see here in 2026, here's number of applications for us, 29, 33, 30, and you can see that compared to other years. Again, I'm looking at the data to say, hey, are we getting busier? Are we getting slower? Like what's happening out there? And you can see already in May, we've almost equaled that of April. Okay, so pretty soon I hope that these numbers get up for everybody. I hope we rent every single property. But again, what we're looking at is actual, like factually, what's happening in for us. And we haven't seen a slowdown compared to April. In fact, it's been amazing, been even better than April. So that's pretty good. So obviously, if we haven't rented your property, I get it, but we're not seeing a slowdown like I thought we might as we get closer to the summer. So having said that, Part two is done, and we're going to speed up here. The other parts won't take as long to go through the data. Parish, do we have any questions at all?
We just had one question from Rose regarding some of your beginning statements. How
Okay.
much was the percent above the mortgage that you have to add for owning per month when you're considering the?
Yeah, so it's a great question because, Rose, because so let me make sure I understand the question correctly. So we were talking about how in some expensive markets, it's more expensive to own a property than to rent a similar one. And so what does that look like or compare to Southwest Florida? And I would say that in some jurisdictions, like Port Charlotte, it seems to be a lot easier to rent than to own. In places like Naples, it's a lot harder to own than, or it's a lot easier to own to some extent than to rent because of that local dynamic. There's not as many rental properties. Fort Myers and Cape Coral and Lehigh, another good question. I would say, generally speaking, if I had to, and using those numbers like I was talking about, like the 290,000, I would say that it's probably much easier to rent right now in Lehigh than to own the similar property in Lehigh. And Cape Coral and Fort Myers, it's probably about where we should be. The problem is that our rents are going down as we're seeing because of oversupply, and also the sales prices are going down. So as the sales price goes down, it makes it easier and easier, so to speak, to buy, right? But also offsetting that is if a similar property is up for rent, and that rent is also getting reduced. So I would probably say right now that for Fort Myers and Cape Coral, honestly, that's a great question. I think that it would probably be a little bit easier to rent than to buy, but not necessarily buy a lot. Okay, so I hope that answers Rose's question. If not, Rose, type it in the chat and Paris will make
I'll
sure that
throw
I
in there,
put.
unless your property is in an HOA and you have to pay
Oh,
HOA fees. Like Michael, you can touch on that a little.
oh, yes, thank you. Thank you. Okay, great question. I don't know who asked that or Parrish brought it up. Okay, so here's one of the things that I've talked to a lot of property managers, especially in Florida. The HOA is a unique animal because unlike all the other real estate questions we talk about, duplexes and single family homes, the HOA has an item that's unique to it where you have your actual dues, and your dues don't necessarily really have a lot to do with what's happening with the interest rate, what's happening to your appraisal, or if the rents are going up or down. It has to do with the budget. Sometimes the budget's affected by a hurricane, for instance. Okay, like obviously that happened to a lot of associations. It also happens to if the dues keep going up and up and up, and the rents and the real estate value don't go up and follow it, you can have a lot of bankruptcies, and you can have associations actually starting to kind of like close down and go almost into receivership. And Florida, I haven't really talked that much about this, but Florida actually addressed that with the ability to dissolve associations for that reason. So if associations keep raising their dues all the time and people can't pay them, and that is definitely a point of contention, and that is not only in Southwest Florida, Tampa after Hurricane Milton and Helene a couple of years ago, there was a lot of damage, water damage, and very hard on owners to try to rent out their properties for even remotely to what they were paying because of the increase in dues. So if you have an association property, there's very little way, unless you bought it years ago, that you're going to be able to break even when they keep raising your dues. That's just it's very, very hard, especially if you bought it recently. But what I would say to those people that have stuff in the association or like a property in the association is that down the road, your value is going to increase. And so right now you're taking it on the chin predominantly because of the dues and the increase. And my only thought is that you should get involved on the board because as Parish knows, and feel free to talk about this for a second, Parish. But a lot of associations are not friendly towards renters at all. They make our life extremely difficult, and it's almost as if they don't often want renters to be there. And literally, we have some associations that wait 29 days, 23 hours, and 52 minutes before they do approval. So, am I saying something, Parish, that's out of whack what you see on the operation side?
That is correct. That's why we have to take care of those HOA applications way ahead of time when you have applicants going in there. 20 days minimum, if not 30, because they'll wait until the end. Rose was clarifying her question a little bit. She's actually looking for a percent of money you should consider above the mortgage that you have to pay for owning a home, as opposed to rent. Like, you know,
Oh, it would be hard for me. I would have to do more of analysis. So if I understand what Rose is saying, what percentage more per month or gross would it be for you to buy a home in Fort Myers versus rent the same home? I think that's maybe what Rose is saying. That would be I could look into that and get everybody back an answer. So kind of like we were saying, I think what Rose is pointing out is, hey, if it was more expensive in New York City by $400 to own a property versus rent that same property, what's it like, say, in Fort Myers? I would obviously have to take that out of an association, so we want to make sure that that's right. But that would be a very good question, and I will look into that. Yeah, like I said before, it's a little bit harder because the rents are sliding, and so is the sales price of a lot of places. So the target is shifting Rose, so it's hard to know. But if you like, I would be happy to send it off to people afterwards and let them know, hey, to own a three-bedroom home, it's say $150 more expensive to buy it than to actually rent it. I'll work on that for you guys. Is that did I get that question right, Rose?
you're good to go, Michael.
Good, thank you. Okay, dokie. So let's go into the next thing, local economy. Okay, so a couple of things I want to show you. The unemployment rate rose by zero point 0.1. It's at 5.6. Since I've been doing this and tracking it, it's been around 5% in our area. So that's fine. Okay, that's kind of good. So remember, the reason why unemployment is one of the key metrics for outside of the regular supply and demand that we're talking about for the rental market, it's one of the key components for rent increases. So if you have high unemployment, people cannot afford rent increases. If you have low unemployment, that's better for you to actually increase rents. Okay, so we're kind of stable there. That's good. But here's the thing, discretionary income is down, obviously, because of things like the high gas prices. And we're starting to see that kick up in inflation. Okay. Now, one of the things that you have to understand is that when something like the gas prices go up, a lot of people always point to the gas prices, and that's true. People have to drive often to go places to work, that sort of thing. But what's also missed is the fact that oil itself, not gas, but oil itself, makes so many different things in our lives that when the price of oil goes up, everything actually goes up, not just the cost to drive a car, but also to make tires, to make cell phones, that sort of stuff. So with the inflation rate going up, that's naturally going to cause our rental prices to go down, irrespective of what's happening with the supply and demand, right? So I'll give you another example of this. Back in say 2004, 5, and 6, when I was here, and the prices were increasing, and people were really, really happy every year. It was 25% increase in a value of the property. You're like, this is great, fantastic. And people were saying, well, Michael, like, my property taxes are going up, my insurance is going up because now my home is worth more and the replacement value is worth more. Okay. So they were like, well, I need to raise the rent, say 10% a year. And I said to him, well, that's fine, but you're not going to continue to be able to do that because a person who's working in whatever trade is not normally going to get a 10% increase in pay every year for 3 years. I said, that's not normally going to happen. So the discretionary income at some point, it's going to hit a little bit more of a plateau and you can continue to increase it a huge amount. So that's a little bit of what's happening in our local area. So outside of the inflationary pressures that a lot of people are feeling all over the United States, I get why. But there's also on our side of things and also on your side of things, maintenance is also high. And so the cost of goods to make or produce paint and that sort of stuff is going up. It's going up, period. So that makes things a little bit tough. So when we're looking at, again, just talking about rentals and so forth, we're going to look at people's ability to buy. And so this is an interesting thing I thought I would share with you guys. So, and I'm not sure why this is kind of don't know where that kind of came from, but basically the they were talking about resale properties, and there's a gap between home sellers and buyers. And in Redfin said that now it's the largest difference between there are more sellers than buyers by nearly 630,000. Okay. And this is huge. It dates back to 2013. And they say it's up by 30%. So when we're talking about resale properties, okay, um, what they're basically saying is, as opposed to new construction, there are 600 plus thousand sellers versus buyers. It's a buyer's market, but like they're saying, why is it that it doesn't feel like a buyer's market? It's because of the interest rates. It's because the people that have their homes that might be at 3.5 or 4%, and if they sell their home and move somewhere else and they need a mortgage, it's going to be up to 6.5%. So there's a lot of freezing. And here's another look at the active housing market. This is not this is resale again versus like kind of just talking about new construction. And you're looking at that finally we started to go down a little bit with our inventory for the month of April. So again, this is like April, for each year dating back 8 years. You can see that we went the highest in 2025. Now we're down to a little bit lower in 2026, which is good. The question is again, are they all being bought and are people moving in, or some of them going to rentals? And this is where a lot of people are having problems if they put their market up on the market for sale and they're trying to rent it. The problem is that again, looking at things and it seems like uh, people can't sell them, and so now they're turning to rent it. And what we're seeing right now is again, according to Zillow, we were seeing a near record of 2.3 homes that were listed for rent on their platform were previously listed for sale. And they said this is the highest percentage since 2022, and that accidental landlords are entering the market in a big way. Okay. So what's interesting is that this is also a national trend. It's not just like, say, in our area. Red Fortress sees this. We see a lot of people that said, hey, I'm getting ready to move out of the area. I know I can't sell my property. Let's put it up on the market for rent. And obviously that's a big thing of what's happening with our rentals. Okay. Questions as we hit part number 4. I know it's a lot of information.
Good
I'm just
rolling.
going to be recording
We're
this.
doing good.
We're good. All right. So next thing we're going to talk about. So what's going on with new construction? We talked about available properties for sale and the remarket and how that's slow, and a lot of people can't sell their already built homes, their older homes, so they're turning into the rental market. What's happening with the supply in our area? And what's interesting about the actual the actual home builders' thoughts, and I saw this at the broker owner conference in Louisiana, is that you would think that because we have an oversupply in the area, that a lot of home builders would say, man, don't touch Southwest Florida, like nobody's going to be buying all this sort of thing. And well, what's actually funny is that they've had the exact opposite view, and they've looked at this and they've said, hey, you can see like Myrtle Beach doing the best, but Ocala, here's Punta Gorda, here's Northport, here's Lakeland, and so forth. And you're looking at that going, well, wait a second, why would they still keep concentrating in areas that we have an oversupply? And it's a very simple reason. They say, listen, we've looked at the patterns, and even though Punta Gorda and Cape Coral and Southwest Florida have an oversupply, we still believe that predominantly the growth is going to continue in that area. So the national builders are still saying, no, no, we're not leaving Southwest Florida or other parts like Tennessee or Texas. They're saying, no, 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 we're going to still stay there. We're going to slow down the building, but we don't plan on leaving. Okay, so that's an important aspect. So what does that look like when we start to look at Lee County? And when we start looking at Lee County, okay, what actually like happens in terms of the permits? So if somebody wants to build a brand new home or build multifamily, I wanted to see, well, what's happening in 2026. I'll also get back in a little bit to 2025. So what I started to look at was permits. Permit, how I broke this down is the first category, one permit for 6 units, is a 6 unit building. Okay. 23 permits over here for 46 units. Those are 23 duplexes. And then over here, you see 304 single family homes. So In January of this year, there was a permit pulled for a 6 unit. There was 23 permits pulled for duplexes and 304 permits built for 304 single family home permits built. So what that meant, if you add it up, is there was a total of 356 units. Okay, don't worry about all the numbers. I'm just trying to show you that this is what I did in research. In February, you had a fourplex being permitted, you had 35 duplexes being built for 70 units, and 392 single family homes. That was a total of 466 units. Okay. In March, 34 units, excuse me, multifamily, 11 duplexes, and 350 single family homes. That's a total of 406 units. Okay, in line. And now this month, or this last month, 5 permits for 390 units. Okay, that's pretty big for multifamily. 17 duplexes, 446 single family homes. So for this month, it's 868 units. So for those people, like you're a client, you're a landlord, you're looking at this, you're like, hey, I understand, Michael, there's already oversupply. Wow, like what just happened there? Like, why are they building this, right? So when you look at it in a graphics number, okay, again, what you're looking at is a very big increase all of a sudden last month. Why? I don't know why. It just is. I'm not sure how that happened, but anyways, they just decided, I guess, to build a large apartment community for long-term plans. Again, these things when they're pulling numbers out, it takes like a year plus, obviously, for an apartment community to get permitted in that. So maybe they're thinking in a couple of years we'll need to have another kind of like apartment community down the road. So contrary to popular belief, last month we didn't slow in the building. You can even see with the single family homes, it was 446. Okay, so let's take a look at April numbers. Okay, so what's happening with there? And I'm not sure if I can, again, I'm sorry if you're seeing that little squiggle. Can you see a squiggle, Parish, at all? Or you see that? Okay, it's gone. Is that, sorry about that. Not sure how that got there. Okay, good. So looking at April numbers on my screen, it showed like some markings on it. So in April, I want to say, okay, so maybe I'm crazy. Maybe this was just an utter fluke. Maybe April is a huge month during the year. So let's take a look dating back 6 years prior to everything going down with COVID. So in 2020, April, the building permits, we had about 194 units. We look at 2021, we had some more, 370. I'm going to show you a graph here in a second. 2022 in April, you can see there was more multifamily, 44 units. Those are duplexes again, 408 single family homes. All right. 2023, you had 8 plex, 25 duplexes, 379 single family homes. 2024, 380. Uh-oh. 80 units, 40 duplexes, and 421. 2025, 80 multifamily. Again, these are permits pulled in the month of April. 84 units, those from duplexes, 639 single family homes. And then what we just showed you was obviously a lot for the month of April. Okay, so I was curious. I was looking at these numbers. I go, well, why is that? Is it just generic numbers? Like, why is it that all of a sudden in 2025 we had 639 single family homes being built? Is there any reason? Like, you can kind of see a little bit of statistics and certainty with about 400 or so single family home permits being pulled every April for the last like 5 or 6 years. And the only thing I can think of is that obviously in September of 2022, so that would be right around like kind of coming up here. That's when we had Ian hit. So we should have had some disruption. That didn't actually happen. We also had Helene and Milton hit in October of 2024. They didn't hit us directly. They hit Cape Coral, but most of it was Tampa, St. Pete, and then obviously terrible stuff for the Panhandle in North Carolina. So maybe those other two hurricanes caused this to go up so much. I'm not entirely sure, but these are the numbers, and here's what it looked like visually, a 3-year increase. So if you were looking at the building permits in Lee County for basically the last 3 years, we have really gone heavier into that construction. So you're saying, Michael, I'm not sure why they would be doing that. Is there something that they're seeing? Is there some pent-up demand that you're seeing, and that's why the last 3 years they've really started to crank up in April versus like the previous 4 years? Well, let's get into that. This is the final part, and we'll talk a bit more about these numbers. So, we hear a lot of things in the news about how everybody's leaving New York and so forth. And what I thought was interesting is that for the population of New York, this was from a New York Citizens Budget Commission. They were talking about 114,000. They used the term fled New York. You might want to just use the term they left. 114,000 people left New York in 2025. That's the state. And they said that 66,000 came in internationally. Okay. And the natural birth rate was plus 36,000. So in actuality, there, year over year, not a lot of change in the New York population, but again, where are all these people going? So the 114,000, they're going somewhere, the United States, is it Texas, is it Florida, that sort of stuff, because they don't necessarily need to come to Southwest Florida, but they can, right? We're going to get into that. So then, when we're looking at immigration, it's interesting that if you look at the Department of Motor Vehicles, it's interesting that they're talking about the number of drivers in Lee County. I had some stats also for the other counties, but I didn't want to go too long here. But you can see how the number of vehicles on the road have actually decreased from last year to this year. So there's less 11,000 cars, but the number of drivers have gone up. Okay. So that's kind of interesting. So, like, 15 years old or more, we're having more people theoretically that can drive, just as not as many full-time cars on the road. And if you're looking at this, they're talking about Southwest Florida licensed drivers total. You can see that typically, right before COVID, we had around like 2% increase. Then all of a sudden, you have this huge COVID wave of people coming into our area, living and getting their driver's license changed over. And now we've kind of come back to a regular or a little bit more normal type of pattern. Okay, so what does that kind of mean? That means that the immigration coming from other states to say Southwest Florida has kind of normalized. Okay, and when you're looking at projections, here's something that I thought was interesting. And I'm gonna tell you about these numbers, and we're gonna come back to these numbers because I think they're really important for you to understand what I mean by oversupply and where we're heading, and when is this stuff gonna kind of change around. But this is from the University of Florida in Gainesville, and they're talking about the projections based on some of these models of where is Lee, Collier, and Charlotte going to end up with population. So when you're looking at, for instance, um, Lee County, they're saying that there's going to be a 31% increase. Okay, um, over the next 25 years. But if we're just looking the short term, they're going from 850,000 to 924,000. And you can see there's growth in Collier County and there's growth in Charlotte County. Okay. Collier County, it looks like there's like a close to 25,000. And here you see close to 12,000 here in Charlotte County. So what that means, if I were breaking it down to you per year, is that in Lee County, they're saying that we should be increasing by about 14,500 people per year. Collier just over 5,000, like 5,100, and Charlotte County just over 2,500 per year. So let's just take Lee County, because again, I can do this for Collier and Charlotte too, but let's just take Lee County because again, I think it's representative of a couple of things. But if we're talking about the average amount of people coming into Lee County, no matter where they are, is approximately 14,500. If we looked at that and said, well, geez, it's not going to be necessarily one person moving, it could be two or three people or more moving in, I kind of rounded it off to about 5,000 units per year. Meaning, if we're getting about 14,500 people moving into Lee County, we should be adding probably around 5,000 units, whether they're apartment, duplexes, single family homes, that sort of thing, right? Okay, so when we look at some of these internal migrations real quickly, we're going to see, you're like, wow, these are like pretty interesting graphs and stuff like that. This is foreign people, in other words, outside the United States graph, and this is domestic people that are in the United States coming into Southwest Florida. Okay, so you can see huge amount of Americans were moving in. This is during COVID. 47,000 people came to Southwest Florida in one year. Now it's down to 9,800. So we're getting a quarter of the people moving in that happen at our height. And also you see foreigners, like that could be like anybody that's coming to work here and stuff. It's not necessarily implying illegal. I think in this case, it's probably implying like legal migration. It's down to, let me see here, about 10,000. uh, 10,000 up from, like, or down from last year, which is 13,000. Okay. So again, what it looks like right now is that we're getting, if you add both numbers together, we're getting less than half the people we were a couple of years ago after COVID. Okay. So when I was asking Parrish and Francis about our applications, saying, hey, well, where are people coming with applications? Are they all from Lee County? Where are they coming? Well, it was kind of interesting. Francis kind of confirmed this, and I found a chart for it. In Lee County, they're talking about inflow migration. A lot of people were coming from Collier County. The number one source of people coming in Florida is from Collier County, 4,600. Out of state was Illinois, New York, and Minnesota. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. It's just kind of interesting. So when I asked Frances, she's like, yeah, we're getting a lot of people that are moving over from Broward County or Miami-Dade. They're moving over to live in Lee County. So a lot of migration happening that way. And then if you're looking at Charlotte County, a lot of people are moving from Sarasota north into Collier County, or sorry, Charlotte County, and then followed by some people from Lee County moving up, and they're Illinois and Minnesota and New Jersey making its presence felt in Charlotte County. And then if you're looking at Collier County, a lot of people moving down from Lee County. Now remember, Lee County had 4,600 people coming from Collier County. There's 3,100 going back the other way. And then you see, as you would probably predict, a lot of people moving to Collier County from the East Coast. And then Illinois is the big winner of people moving from Illinois to Collier County. So when you start to factoring all this, and remember what I was saying to you, maybe about 5,000 units, if we're looking at all these projections, like, hey, so we have oversupply right now. We're building. What does it look like right now? So I took another graph here, wanted to simplify this. I took all the building permits in Lee County for the year 2025. And you can see, just like before, the green is multifamily all the way through the years. And then you can see the blue all the way, or single family homes during the year. Now, I'm not going to have you guys take out your calculators and add this up. But remember, I was saying if they're projecting on average 14,500 people coming in per year for Lee County in the next 5 years, okay, and we kind of think that maybe there should be about 5,000 new units built, apartment, duplex, or single family homes to accommodate this, okay, what does that look like? Well, in 2025, if you add up all these numbers, it was 8,272 permits pulled. So what that meant is, if you're looking at it, we talk about oversupply. So remember, we already have oversupply, been going on for several years. They could have theoretically built more than 3,000 extra units, okay, in terms of oversupply. Okay, now the good news is they're starting to maybe see that. And if you recall, in 2026, when I did like the January, February, March, and April, if you added those numbers up, it was 2,096 through the first 4 months. So again, if we're supposed to be building about 5,000 units per year just to accommodate our growth, okay, right now the first not even quarter, 4 months, right, is 2,096. Okay, so that's maybe about 6,000 for 2026. What it means is that we're still in 2025, we overbuilt, and 2026, we're bringing it down, but we're still theoretically overbuilding. The good news is we're building at about 1,500 units less per year. Okay. So let me end with this, and then Parrish will take people's questions if you want to bring them on video and that sort of stuff. What does this kind of mean? Okay. And remember that when we're talking about all these data, when somebody pulls a permit to build a single family home, it's not built in the next month. It can take 6 months to build, depending on what's happening. Same thing with an apartment community. It takes, like, say, a year plus for it to come on. So today, what we're starting to see is that the building is slowing today. Now, I think that April 2026 was uh, something that was odd, because there was a 390 unit multifamily permit issued. But we're starting to see, if you look at 2025 and 2026, you're starting to see that they're starting to pull back the building today. But remember, we still have seen oversupply before. We're still seeing some oversupply in 2025, a lot. 2026, we're still seeing oversupply. So they haven't fully adjusted to the point where more people are coming in and they're building less so that we're going to start getting that absorption I'm talking about. Okay. So if you follow me with that, so it'd be nice if they built even less or they pull permits even less so that there's more people coming into the area and they're starting to drive down all those numbers that we talk about in the rental analysis. Okay. Now, I believe that there's going to be less oversupply, like we're starting to see in 2026, and I'm going to keep track of this for you guys over the next 1 to 2 years. So, what does that mean? It means that we're starting to see them pull back in 2026. If it wasn't for that one large apartment community, you can still see that they're starting to get more in line with what's naturally happening. But we're 2 years into this downward trend. And I would predict, based on what they're doing, what builders are doing, and so forth, is that we're probably about halfway through. What does that mean? Well, if they start slowing the permits in 2026, all the rest of this year, and they go below that, say, 5,000 theoretical mark, that's great. And we're going to start absorbing some of our oversupply, but it's going to take at least another year and a half if they start doing that for us to see those numbers starting to come down and so that we can start raising rents and that property values are going to start increasing again. And kind of a final note, as I would say to some of our clients, if I were a real estate investor, I would be looking at buying soon because what's going to happen is this market is going to continue to slide as they continue to overbuild. And some of the resale homes, meaning homes that have already been built, say 5 years ago or 10 years ago, they're going to be their value is going to be lowering. And then if you buy them, say soon in the next year, they're going to be priced the lowest, just like they were back in 2008. And then when the prices are going to go up, you're going to feel a lot of benefit financially from it. Remember, in recorded history in Florida, so let's say 1980 on, there has never been a time in a 10-year period that the real estate value in Southwest Florida has gone down. It has always risen every decade, every decade, every decade. And so just thought I would end with that. Parish, are there any questions for me? I know that was a lot of information. Thank you for staying on it, and hopefully some of this actually made sense.
There's nothing in the chat, but I'm going to turn it on so anyone can unmute themselves and they can. I've allowed anyone, you can unmute yourselves and ask Michael any questions you have there.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Michael. Do
Sure.
you, would you manage a property that's considered co-housing
Co-housing. So
where,
let me make sure I understand. And Rose, great to have you again. So you're talking about, say, taking a single family home and breaking it up into like bedrooms and so forth. Yeah. Okay. Great question, Rose. There are a lot of people that are starting to do that. Now, what's interesting about it is if you take a three-bedroom home and you break it into three individual units, okay, you're actually theoretically adding, in a way, supply to an already oversupplied market. But the reason why they do it is that if you say rent a single room for $600, you as the owner might be able to make more if you rent out each room. Okay, so just so people understand the concept. So Rose, it's a very good question. I see it. Um, we normally don't for this reason. There are a lot of legal um, problems with this. Okay. So let me give you a different type of example. Um, we've had people, for instance, take a single family home and they've kind of created a second or third unit and they closed it off and they put an exterior door to unit B. So they kind of like you're saying, broke it up. But as opposed to having a cohabitation, it legitimately is like they have a shower for unit B and a shower for unit C. And the problem is that it's not legal by code. It's not legal by the strap number. It's not legal by how the police might give a legal notice. So that's what I mean by it can get into some issues. So if you have to, for instance, file an eviction, it can and has created problems in the past. So one of the reasons why Red Fortress doesn't do it is for that reason. Now, could you as an individual owner do it? You could, but you're now going from kind of like annual management to almost like a hybrid of annual and seasonal, where it's going to require more effort. It's going to require more effort because the people that are going to be moving in to something like that, they're probably looking for a little less long-term housing. And what I mean by that is you're not normally going to have a family move in. You're going to have like an individual move in, and they're probably going to stay there for maybe 7 or 8 months until maybe they get back on their feet, and that sort of thing. So does that did I kind of hit the?
So you're saying it is legal or isn't legal to do that?
It's okay. And I'm not an attorney, and I don't work for the building department, but if you're doing something like that, you have to set up certain things legally for it to be legal. So you can't just all of a sudden arbitrarily say, I have a 3 bedroom home in North Fort Myers and I'm going to create unit A, B, and C. And I'm just going to like sign a lease for unit A, sign a lease for unit number B, and sign a use for C. Because let me give you an example. And I'm not an attorney, nor do I play one on television, but I can see problems very rapidly happening. So what happens when person B wants to use the kitchen with unit C, all that sort of stuff, when you have a common area that has to be like, for instance, clearly spelled out. So there's a lot of things that go into something like that that you really want to, specify in your lease because it's not going to be in ours or any other property managers because we don't have those problems.
I see.
Make
Okay,
sense?
thank you.
Yep,
Mhm.
absolutely. My pleasure, Rose. Great to have you. And anybody else? I know, thank you, by the way, guys, for being here 5:30 to 6:30. I know your time is valuable. And by the way, I cut out a lot of information to get this information to you guys succinctly as I could. But like I said, I always try to look at numbers and say, hey, where's this market going? What are we seeing? And hopefully some of you found this information not just useful, but maybe shocking to some extent. I know I was when I saw the building permits in April. I'm like, oh no, don't build a 390 unit one. We don't need it. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Anything else, guys, before we adjourn?
I have a question.
Yes. Sorry about that. Somebody had a
Yeah,
question?
how
Oh,
often?
go ahead, please. Nope, you just muted again.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, it was muted. Whoops, it was muted. Can
Sure,
you hear
go
me
ahead.
now?
I can hear you great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Just wondering how often do you do these meetings? This is quite a lot of information. I appreciate it. You present it very well. So, but anyway, just do you do this again?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking. And I normally do these sessions at least once every 2 months, if not every month. Part of it, there's a lot of
Oh,
uh, thank you very much, but there's a lot of information that I look into to provide this to you guys and to the industry. In fact, like last year, I spoke to local property management association because I think that this is something that everybody needs to know. So I normally do it once every 2 months or every month, depending on the topic. So um, I normally alternate like financial versus like something that somebody might find appealing. So I send out to all of our clients as well as people that are not clients. Like I have had people question and ask questions all over the United States on some of these. People see them, for instance, on our YouTube channel and then email me. So I always try to choose topics, honestly, that I think would interest people. I know that the rental market typically does naturally for people if they have a rental property. But if there's any other topic that you would like me to cover, I would be happy to do it. So, if you're a client of ours, right, you should normally get an email from me. I think I sent this one on Saturday. And if you're not getting the emails, let us know. And because sometimes your spam filter will take care of it, that sort of stuff. And I'm looking at actually getting a better way to distribute our email so that you know when we're going to have it. But typically, it's going to be the middle of the month on a Tuesday at 5:30. It's the best time that I found that we can do it for people overseas as well as people on the West Coast. And so it's normally mid-month, and if it's not every month, it's every second month for sure. And if you have a
okay.
subject you want me to
Okay.
deal with, I will either do a video on it or I'll feature it as a Zoom session. So great question. Is that good? Anyone
I have one
else?
more question.
Yeah, that's
Go ahead,
oh,
Rose.
Do
that's
you
good. Thank you.
support vacation rentals? Do you
I'm sorry,
manage
say that
them?
again, Rose. Sorry.
Do you manage vacation rentals?
Okay, we don't yet. I use the term yet. So we have helped some people find renters for vacation rentals. But right now we don't do it. And the reason why, Rose, is because we're looking at improving our annual rental practice. There's a lot to it. Um, and so I want to stay focused on it. But eventually there is a possibility that we do handle that because there's a lot of need for it. So, much like I said to you before, Rose, it's shocking to me that when we're talking about our industry in Southwest Florida, that people aren't going to state conferences or broker owner conferences, which is literally the state of the industry and where we are today with AI and everything. And I won't even bore you with people. Maybe I can talk to you about AI at another session and how we start to use it in a right manner. So that's why we don't do seasonal yet. We could, and maybe in the future we will once I feel like Parrish and I are working on a couple of operational things to improve our service, whether it's advertising. We know it's a down market. We're trying to do everything we can to rent your properties, from increased advertising to follow up to everything, taking calls at 11 o'clock at night, whatever we can do to rent your properties. Once we get that done, maybe we'll consider it, Rose. Richard, did you have a question?
Do you want to ask when that is?
Yeah.
Or anybody else?
I have, I'm just curious, as a landlord,
Sure.
when do you think would be the best time to sell a rental?
Great. So there's a lot that goes into that question. So the number one question that I always ask people as a client or even people that I don't know, they ask me that question. I ask them, and I don't mean to be flippant, but I ask them, what are you going to do with the money? So a lot of people would say, oh, the market's down. I want to sell my home. Well, okay, so let's just say that you sold your home for exactly what you wanted. What would you do with the money? Now, there could be a very good reason for it, like you're selling your home, you're buying an RV, and you're going to drive around North America. Okay, that would be a very good reason for you to do something like that, right? But also, you sometimes people don't think of that, and they all of a sudden have all this money, and then they're next like, oh, well, what do I do with it? So sometimes people might sell it to kind of buy more properties in a down market, right? Sometimes they see an opportunity to buy a company or to invest in something else. That might be a time to do it. But the question is really is like, how immediate or how bad do you need the money right now? Because if it is a down market, it means that if you sell it today, it's not going to be quite as worth what it could be in 2 years, right? So again, when people were, and I was at the same desk doing what I'm doing today, but in 2006, seven, and eight, when everything was coming up and then it crashed, when people were trying to get rid of their homes and all that sort of stuff, and they're like, oh my gosh, like everything's going bad and it's 40% down year over year, people were getting out of the market. But the question is was that the time to sell it? Maybe for them it was because of the stress, but financially if you held on to it for 3 or 4 years, you would have made a lot more money when the market rebounded. So does that kind of answer your question a little bit in terms of,
Yes, it does. Thank
yeah,
you.
like when to sell it? Sometimes there's not a right time to sell it or a wrong time. It just depends on how much you you need the money for. And if you don't need the money, typically you don't sell it as
Correct.
much in a down market. Maybe. Hope
Thank
that's
you.
good advice. That's what I would do if it was mine. Great question.
Yeah. Thank you.
My pleasure. Anything else, guys? Anything else?
You were clear, Michael. I think
We are
it's
clear. All right. Well, so everybody, I appreciate your time. Again, if you have a topic that you would like me to discuss, even if you have a topic or an answer that you want me to get to, please feel free to email me directly at mike@redfortresspm.com. It hasn't changed for last 6 years. But again, if you want to do that, great. And I appreciate your time. Thank you for for appreciating the detail that I put into it. It takes a lot of work, and I think it's really necessary in our area. So few people focus on the rental market, and these numbers matter. So I talk, as some people would know, my property managers, I talk to them all the time about this, where we are, where we're heading, how we can rent properties. And that's the number one thing that we do with our time today, besides improving. So thank you so much for being here. Paris, thank you for moderating as always. And I appreciate your time. And guys, we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.